Hi guys, welcome to this session in Microsoft Project. In this module, I want to show you how you can create a resource list and assign resources to tasks. So I've got a few tasks on the screen here. Now I need to go and get a resource list. Down the bottom right, you've got a few icons down here. One of them is the resource sheet. Clicking on that, and you get this sort of grid here. I'll just make it a little bit bigger, going on to the format options so you can see this. So I'll change the font size to 16 so everything's nice and big. Right, so you basically type the resource name here. So I'm just going to go for a few people: Bill, Ben, Anne and Carol. Now there's three different types of resource. You've got a work resource, which is the default, like a person, man hours, effort. You've got material resource and you've got a cost resource. So I'm going to go and do a few material resources. Let's have a look at that. So if I go for computers, if I go for Microsoft Office and paper, and then I'll do a hotel, so you can see how cost field would work. So these are going to be material, so you need to change those to material. Don't leave them on work, otherwise the computer sees it as effort. Material, like so, and this last one is going to be cost resource. Now on the material side of things, you've got this label option. So instead of having, for example, Microsoft Office appearing on a Gantt chart as a label, you could put MSO in there. You could put PCs maybe in there. And paper, I'll put pack. Not putting anything for that. Initials, I'm just picking up the initials from there. Now, resource names for the people, I've put Bill and Ben, etc., and that would give me the full functionality of Microsoft Project because that is an actual person. When they go and leave, I can factor that in. Quite often, though, resources are allocated like this. So it would be, instead of the person's name, it would be the appointment, like an electrician or a plumber or something like that, or a trainer. Let's go for a trainer. So trainer, it's going to be a work resource, but I might have a few trainers. Now if I come across, you can see that there's 100% on all these work resources. But when you've got it like that, trainer, plumber, builder, etc., quite often you would put that maybe at, say, 300. That means there's 3 people in that group that you can utilize. I can also, having said the word group, use this column. The more you fill in, the better it's going to be. I'll use this column. So let's say Bill is a trainer as well. So these could be external trainers. He's a trainer, and I can pull this one down. Let's say those 3 are trainers and Carol's a manager. So she's a manager. Just put a capital M there. And they're all available 100% of the time. If that was at 50%, they would be 50% of the time, etc., etc. Now the rates of pay, let's say they're on £10 an hour and £15 overtime if they do overtime. You can highlight those two, pull it down. Let's say the manager's on £20 an hour and £25 for overtime. Now, coming down to the material, you've got a couple of columns that you can utilize here. Standard rate column. So every time I use a computer, for example, I could have a figure in there, or I could put in cost per use. Cost per use would be, that is the cost no matter how many you have. So let's say I'll do that one. I'll put £500 in there. So if you have one computer, it's going to be £500. If you have 10, it's going to be £500. That would be an agreement you've come up with. Microsoft Office, though, let's say this is a license. Every time you allocate a license, it's going to cost you 100 quid. And then paper, it's going to cost £1 per pack. Now, these people down here, 3 of these, let's put these on £20 and there's no overtime rate. So that's all populated. You don't get the option to put a cost in on the cost resource, that goes in at a later date. So you've got this accruing at pro rata. You've got some options in there. If you drop that little arrow down, you can have it accruing at the start of a project or at the end of a project. I'm going to leave that like that. Base calendar. These resources are all using the base calendar. So what happens in project is, if you change a resource's calendar, for example, if I double click into Bill, every resource has its own calendar, change working time. If I change this calendar, which I will do, I'll just go into it, and let me say that work times, details, let's say it doesn't work Fridays at all. So I'm going to set that as a non-working day for Friday. So if I allocate Bill on a Friday, there's going to be a problem. So he doesn't work. So this calendar, if I click OK to this for a second, this calendar for Bill overwrites the default calendar for the whole project. Otherwise, they just use the default calendar. So everything else is okay there. Now what I need to do is go and allocate people to tasks. So I'm coming back to the Gantt chart, and then I'm clicking on, let's say, task 1, and I go to resource and I sit on here, assign resources. This is the way I always do it. It's the best way, I think. This box floats, so you can see a list and you can see a task. So I can click on here. This still stays there. It's grayed out a little bit, and I can click back into here, and then this bit becomes active. So on task 1, if I click on task 1, I want to assign Anne, the manager. So assign Anne, and then the cost should come through for Anne. There's no cost coming through there, so I need to go back and look at resource sheet. £20. She's £20 an hour, so there should be a cost for that. If I go back onto the Gantt chart, you've got a link to it there. Gantt, that first one. So on that first task, okay, there's no cost because I can't see that there's no duration. That's a milestone. So you don't normally allocate people to a milestone. So I'll change that. I'll just remove her off there. I'll put her on task 2. Task 2, assign. Should get the money, £160, £20 an hour. That's 8 hours. That's £160. That's correct. So that's what you have to do. If something you assign somebody and you don't get any costs in here, usually it's because there isn't a cost allocated in the resource sheet. And if there is, you then come back and look and do what I did there. I'd like to say that I did that on purpose, just as a teaching point, but I didn't. But I've corrected it now. So let's go on to task 3, and let's say we want Ben and Bill on there, assign. Let's give them 2 computers, assign. That's going to be £500, remember, no matter how many computers there are. It's a fixed cost. I want to assign paper, assign. It says 1 pack, £1, but let's say they use 1 pack per hour. This is how you would factor that in. You go 1/HR. When you click off that, that should say 32, because that's a 4-day task. 4/8 is 32. And then Microsoft Office, which is £100 per license. I want to assign 2 of them. Comes in at £100. Change that to 2. And then that goes up to £200. So I'm just going to close that off for a second. Close this off. And change this view, the table view, to the cost table, just to show you the impact of what we've just been doing there in terms of cost. So as you are adding resources, the cost for that addition is clocking up here. You can see that there, total cost. So I'll just put that back into the entry table so you can see it, back into there, and get my resources back up. Assign resources. Now the only thing I haven't assigned anywhere is the hotel. So let's say we've got all of these guys doing this. Let's say they're in a hotel. So I'll assign a hotel. this is where you put the price. So I'll put £200 in there, and then there's an allocation of £200 for the hotel, which is quite cheap. Let's go to task 4. Okay, I'm going to assign the trainers to task 4. Assign that. So one person is 160. Watch what happens if I change that to 2 people. It stays at 160 quid, pounds for Americans, but it's done the duration down, which I need to fix. So I'm going to put that to 3 people. So 3 people, they're all doing it in a third of a day. I want this to be 1 day though, so I'm going to go back and intervene here and put that to a day, and then that cost will go up to reflect that. Put that to 1 day, it will. So that's now gone up to 400 and something, £480. 3 people doing that in a 1 day period, they're all getting full pay. So you just have to watch that when you're assigning resources, that it doesn't drive the duration down. That used to be the default for normal tasks when you added resources. If you added them incrementally, one after the other, it would redo the duration. It still does that when you are having multiple resources that are grouped like the trainers are in this example. Let's close this down. Back to the resource sheet. So if you double click into any of these, you get the resource information. So I'll double click into that. So this is all the information about this resource, Ben. You can see there that it's got availability here. You can set that up so it's not available. So available from to. So if I say it's not available, I'll try and get him to go red here. So it's not available until the 25th, and I'll leave it as NA. So basically from the 25th onwards, he is available. If I click OK to that, he's now gone red because I've allocated him already on a task. If I go back to the Gantt chart, he will be red on that as well. So I'd have to sort that out, which I'm not going to do just yet. I'll go back into it and go back into him and change that. So I'll put him back so he is available. All you do then is just put NA there, not applicable. You could also go into his working time and put him on holiday. These exceptions would be a holiday. So let's say I'll just put that down as holiday, and then it can be from today. What is today's date? It's the 7th, and to the 11th. That'll do. Okay. Okay. All right. So he's now. If we go back to the Gantt chart, Ben. Let's just have a look at this. Bring this over a little bit. So Ben on that task, that's okay, is not over allocated. So if I go back into it, so 7th to the 11th, so he's back. He's back, that's the 13th, so that didn't affect him. Let me go back into it. Double click on Ben. And that's what you basically got to do. You just got to check that they're available for that. This sort of thing would be filled in first before you allocate the people. Now at the top, you've got a cost field where you can, for example, if you've got, this is his default rate. If you've got him working somewhere where you get danger money, so if I say from the 18th, he's going to be on £15. I won't bother with overtime. His rate is going to be £15. And then back a week after, it'll come back down, say he's going to some hostile place, comes back down to his default rate, 10. For that week, you'll be paid at £15 an hour. And you've got all these extra tabs where you can do that as well. You've got a notes tab at the top where you can add notes for this person. You might want to embed an object. could be his CV, it could be his job spec, whatever you want to embed there, or link it to wherever it is on your network or SharePoint. If you've added any custom fields in this resource sheet, they would appear there. So I'm just going to click OK to that. So that's Ben. And you do the same for each of these. Obviously, you can't do a lot of that when it's a group of people. So that's why that's slightly negates some of the features in project. Some people would say you shouldn't have material mixed with staff. That's totally up to you. I'm just showing you the functionality. There's 3 types, and that's the 3 types. If you want to separate material from staff or workforce, that's up to you. But that's all I want to cover on this little video. Hopefully you found that useful, and I'll catch you on the next one.